Early September 2008. The high-altitude air is tinged with autumn. I walk through the alleys of Lo Munthong, the largest settlement in northern Mustang District, Nepal. This is the time before animals have been let out to graze, before children have gone off to the new local daycare, to school, or to help gather dung and tend animals. I pass whitewashed homes decorated with protective door hangings above the threshold, colored yarn webs holding sheep skulls, repelling nefarious spirits and gossip. I hear the muffled sounds of cymbals, bells, and the resonant drone of Tibetan Buddhist monks calling forth another day. Mustang lies in the Himalayan rain shadow. It is mostly high-altitude desert, abutting the Tibet Autonomous Region, China. Jomsom, the district's headquarters, is linked to Pokhara, the nearest city, by flights from a small airport and by trails. No all-season motor road connects the district to any urban center, although this reality is changing swiftly. Upper Mustang, at the center of which sits Lo Munthong, is home to Tibetan speakers, Sampa eaters, and practitioners of Buddhism and Bon, indigenous religious practices of the Tibetan Plateau. On this crisp September morning, I round the corner past Thubchen, a 15th-century monastery that has been restored recently. I walk past a row of reliquaries and stop before the wooden corrugated metal door leading to a school. A window, rimmed in black and red paint, rests above the door. Between window and door hangs a trilingual signboard. There is an arc of English Lo Kunfen traditional herbal medicine clinic and school under which is written an approximation of the same, first in Tibetan and then in Nepali. The Tibetan reads Lo Kunfen Mensakang Lobdra. The Nepali reads Lo Kunfen Amchi Ausbat Hilaya School. My friends and colleagues, Gyatso and Tenzin Bista, run this small institution. I have passed this sign many times. This morning it stops me short. I realize that, in Nepali, there is nothing Tibetan about this place. In Tibetan, centuries of interconnected history between Mustang and centers of Soa Rigpa in Lhasa, Dharamsala, and beyond are implicit in the choice of names given to this institution. In English, the deceptively simple signifier traditional herbal medicine supplants regionally and culturally specific understandings of medicine and heath care. The only other element on the sign is, in a sense, its heart, a small rendering of Sanji Menla, the medicine Buddha, his offering bowl brimming with arura, the fruit of the myrobalan tree and the king of medicines. This sign is a mosaic, an assemblage of meaning. To understand only one of these languages is to miss the negotiations of culture and identity wrapped up in my interlocutors' efforts toward increasing the social efficacy of their practice in a new age. To see this sign simply as a handmade entrance to a marginal institution in faraway place is to miss the point. Certainly this is a remote locale. But it is a place connected to regimes of value and patterns of social change that stretch out from the Himalaya and Tibetan Plateau, down the Indian subcontinent, across the world, and back again. Filled with these thoughts about identity and belonging, language and culture, tradition and contemporary life, I walk through the door and enter the courtyard of Lo Kunfen. Several students cluster around a water spigot, brushing their teeth. Older students ready the simple dining hall for breakfast, after prayers and before classes. I greet them and head toward the back door of Lo Kunfen, which lets me out beyond Lo Munthang's city wall, in front of Gyatso and Tenzin's home, the lower floor of which is devoted to an herbarium and small Soa Rigpa museum. I climb the stairs and call out a greeting. Gyatso's familiar voice answers, inviting me in. Mantras, IVs, and morning tea. 7:30 a.m. Gyatso is seated on low cushions in the main room, drinking salt butter tea. The brother's infirm mother directs morning traffic. 2 generations of this family's women perform chores as seamlessly as if playing a symphony. Gyatso's wife loads the stove with sheep and goat dung, blows embers awake, pours water into a kettle, and sets it to boil. She then breaks grassy clumps of brick tea into this tepid water and metes out a pinch of Tibetan salt. Her eldest niece carves a slab of butter from a block with the swiftness of a potter slicing clay. She tosses it into the tea churner. These acts mark a days. A stack of notebooks sits on a wooden table in the corner, nestled between divans laid with Tibetan carpets. Some of these books are tea-stained and once or twice soaked through by rain. Their pages contain all manner of notations, written mostly in Tibetan, at times in Nepali, or in approximations of English, sounded out. They bespeak these doctors' networks, prescription notes, names of tourists who might become school sponsors, lists of plants and other raw materials to buy in Edam Bahal or Indra Chowk, old Kathmandu neighborhoods where herb traders hawk and bargain. Beside these notebooks are religious texts wrapped in cloth, a Tibetan English medical dictionary, and a binder whose plastic sheaths protect stacks of receipts for school expenses. These pieces of paper must be carried to Jomsom in saddlebags, then on to Kathmandu in Chinese-made totes embossed with NGO insignia, gifts from academic conferences and conservation development workshops these brothers have attended. In Kathmandu these recollections of rupees spent are presented to a Nepali accountant who reconciles the books and sends them to British, German, and U.S. charities that help to support the school. This institution is an experiment in bridging the gaps between Gyatso and Tenzin's father's generation and the worlds their children will inherit. Tenzin comes into the room carrying a glass bottle of a glucose and saline solution, a splice of 4 tubing, and a still sterile hypodermic needle. The glucose is Nepali-made, though nearly every other commercial item in this house was manufactured in China: thermoses, blankets, solar panels that charge their satellite telephone. Tenzin moves toward his mother. This woman has been unable to walk for years and has, in a sense, been waiting to die ever since her husband passed away, in 1996. For all her despondency, she is still the center of this home, the voice to which everyone defers. Tenzin calls his niece, a senior student at Lo Kunfen. They prop up the old woman so she can receive this 4 infusion. I ask Tenzin why he has chosen to give this biomedical treatment to his mother. It gives her strength, since she struggles to eat, he responds. The old woman seems calm until Tenzin produces the needle. Then she wriggles, moans, covers her eyes. The niece struggles to still her grandmother. Seeing the task will not be easy, Tenzin calls for Gyatso. These sons reassure their mother. Then, deftly, Gyatso pins down her forearm as Tenzin inserts the needle past layers of weathered mountain skin into the river of a bluish vein. Tenzin tapes the needle in place, attaches it to the tubing, and hangs the glass bottle from a hook fitted to the ceiling above the old woman's perch. All the while one of the youngest members of the extended family looks on with fascination, nestled beside her great-grandmother, enfolded in layers of wool. This simple act needle into vein and the slow, steady infusion of sugars, salts, and water into this old woman reminds me there are no easy ways to parse this world of healing. Neither the terms tradition and modernity nor a presumed ideological divide between Tibetan medicine and biomedicine makes much sense here. Chapter 3, Fieldwork and Ethnography. These Buddhist Amchi have given a biomedical anodyne with tenderness to their ailing mother. They do so in great part because empiricism has brought them here. They know it works because their mother's cheeks flush after such infusions. Just the same, a different empiricism instructs them to conduct long life rituals and wear protection amulets. Ultimately they will face their mother's death as part of sentient existence, one karmic turning of the wheel of life. Masters of the Gift, 9 a.m. Gyatso, Tenzin, and I move into the school's chapel and library. The phrase "someone who wears many hats" works in both English and Tibetan. This is often how I feel about these brothers. In addition to his responsibility as principal of Lo Kunfen, Tenzin is also a senior monk at Chode Monastery, a Sakya Tibetan Buddhist institution in Lo Munthong. Yesterday he spent half the day performing a ritual in the household of someone who had recently died. Gyatso, like his father before him, is the householder priest and doctor to the royal family of Lo. Since 2003 he has also been the chairman of the Himalayan Amchi Association. Yesterday, despite our plans to review clinic records and write a funding proposal, Gyatso was called to the palace to greet officials from across the border in the TAR. Yesterday's unexpected visit put off our work on the grant proposal until this morning. Gyatso and Tenzin begin by reiterating to me their need for money. They struggle to raise sufficient funds to maintain the school of 30 to 40 students, along with their factory and small branch clinics. Our current task is to craft a proposal for a London-based foundation that has normally supported only Tibetan refugees. On occasion it will accept applications from Tibetan border peoples such as those from Mustang. We begin to work. A familiar process of translation ensues. In eloquent Tibetan, Gyatso and Tenzin speak of the decline of Sowa Rigpa across the Himalayas, the role of Amchi in providing healthcare to rural populations, the importance of teaching and practicing Amchi medicine, and then the punchline, the need for funds to develop a more advanced course in Sowa Rigpa in Nepal, to be based in the small city of Pokhara, and the need to expand their clinical practice in Mustang so senior students might have employment to keep them in their rural communities and so that local populations might have access to a complete pharmacy of Tibetan formulas, even those the brothers cannot produce themselves. Gyatso and Tenzin's search for funding consumes enormous time and energy. Without significant government support for Sowa Rigpa in Nepal, indeed, even if such support materializes in the coming years, non-governmental sponsorship remains. Portrait of a Himalayan Healer 87. 1. Paramount. In Tibetan, Jindag means master of the gift. These days it is a term used to describe charitable foundations, individual sponsors, private patrons, and NGOs. Gyatso and Tenzin know me as a researcher, a translator, and a friend. But they also know me as a Jindag. My engagement with Lo Kunfen has included raising money for the clinics and school, in part through an NGO I helped to found. Just because I understand the nuance of an enduring Tibetan form of social relations does not make our allegiance to each other simple, though. This morning Gyatso echoes a familiar refrain. Jindag are like the wind and the rain, he says. They come and they go. We cannot predict from which direction. But we need them for these seeds we have planted to ripen. It is an honest assessment, if also an organic metaphor voiced by a person who knows so well of this earth of which he speaks. Gyatso, Tenzin, and I are interrupted by a knock on the chapel door. A mother arrives with her son. He fell off a horse 2 days ago and appears to have fractured his left forearm. The boy is no more than 10. Rivulets of tears trickle down his dusty cheeks. Gyatso takes the boy's pulse from his ear, as is standard for children, feeling along his shoulder and arm. Tenzin prepares an herbal ointment mixed with rapeseed oil. The boy cringes. Gyatso tells him not to cry. The brothers have established several small clinics in villages surrounding Lo Munthong, but the work of healing still often occurs in their home. He was taking care of our sheep and goat, the boy's mother explains. He shouldn't have been on the horse anyway. He should have been walking, collecting dung. But he never listens. This mother seems worried and exasperated. You see, she needs his labor. The cost of hiring lowland Nepalis to herd or bring in the barley crop remains prohibitive for this family, like many others in Lo. Don't worry, says Gyatso. The boy will be fine. Tenzin hands his brother the herbal mixture and 2 kathag, white silk offering scarves. Gyatso applies the ointment to the fractured bone and then bandages the boy's arm, creating a sling out of a blessing. Tenzin wraps up some of the powdery herbal mixture in a sheaf of paper. Mix 3 spoonfuls of this with rapeseed oil. Change this dressing every day, he instructs. The woman pulls out a money purse that was pinned to the inside of her blouse. She attempts to hand Gyatso several hundred rupees, but he exits the room, indicating that cash payment is not necessary. Instead, the woman leaves a cotton satchel of dried cheese with Gyatso's elder sister, who accepts this gift. As I watch this exchange, I struggle to square differential regimes of value. How might we reconcile the moral economy of Amchi work and this in-kind payment of locally produced food with the political economy of becoming self-sustaining and the Excel spreadsheets over which we had just been laboring? 3 After the young boy with the broken arm departs, Gyatso, Tenzin, and I set aside our paperwork. The proposal must wait. Tenzin heads off to teach a lesson from the explanatory Tantra, one of 4 books that comprise the Gyushi. Gyatso and I saddle 2 of the family's horses and prepare to visit the clinics north of Munthong. This, he said, patting the horse's rump, is Mustang ambulance. True enough. Just a few days before, a man from Namdo, a village near the Tibetan border, roused Tenzin from sleep with a message that his wife was severely ill. Tenzin and the husband set off in the pre-dawn darkness. Tenzin treated the woman, left her with medicines, and rode the 3 hours home only to see another patient in a nearby settlement later that day. On this afternoon the horse lives up to its reputation. We fly over chalky paths, past verdant sedges and wildflowers that persist after Mustang's brief, bucolic summer. We arrive midday in the village of Thinker. The clinic sits above the village in a small mud brick building. My friend opens the clinic, revealing the rudiments of healthcare in Upper Mustang, a wooden cabinet filled with about 50 small bottles of neatly labeled Tibetan medicines, all produced by Gyatso and Tenzin, with help from senior students, a small table and bench, 2 chairs, a dusty but well-used clinic logbook in which the name, gender, and age of patients, a shorthand diagnosis, and prescriptions are recorded. This regime of accountability is as new as the clinics themselves, and not unrelated. Gyatso and Tenzin's father never kept such records as he traveled from neighbor to neighbor and received patients in his home. He had no clinic and no need for a written record of these therapeutic encounters. He was not accountable to foreign donors or to a nation-state. Now clinic records render the work of healing legible in new ways to people beyond this immediate social ecology. Reports generated from these logbooks can make the scope of Amchi medicine visible to government functionaries: the district health officer, the Council on Technical Education and Vocational Training, the Department of Ayurveda at the Ministry of Health, and foreign donors. This record-keeping is also part of Gyatso and Tenzin's hybrid pedagogy, part lineage-based local practice, part formalized institution. Senior students are required to spend time staffing the clinics. Logbooks hold them accountable to their own learning process and to patients because making records requires students to reflect, even briefly, on what they are diagnosing and prescribing. In addition, logbooks are windows onto which medicines are used most, what formulas need to be replenished, and what illnesses are most common in a given season. These rudimentary notes scribbled in Tibetan cursive with whatever writing implement happens to be nearby illustrate how Tibetan medicine is being made legible to the state and to non-state actors like NGOs. Each year since the clinics opened, Gyatso or Tenzin have sent me copies of the logbooks or hand them to me in Kathmandu. With assistance from low-confin senior students and Dartmouth undergraduates, I have helped Gyatso and Tenzin transform these Portrait of a Himalayan Healer 89 handwritten records into computer files capable of producing a new kind of authoritative knowledge, statistics. It is helpful to report that these clinics see an average of 1,000 patient visits annually during the 7 months their doors are open, and that this number has continued to rise each year since the clinics opened in 2004. Or that the median age of patients is 42, 46% of whom are male. Or that sandalwood and saffron-based medicines are some of the most popularly prescribed, even though neither of these ingredients is local or affordable. Logbook analyses reveal that women suffer more from disorders of the channels and of wind, and that men have more accidents. There is a knock on the door. Normally this clinic is open only 3 days a week, staffed by a low-confin student who is also preparing for his at the nearby high school. But word travels quickly when a senior Amchi is in town. A local woman, middle-aged and moon-faced, stands at the door. She wears a woolen embroidered skullcap typical of Upper Mustang's women of an older generation. She complains of sore, swollen knees. She lifts her frock and hitches up her petticoats to reveal fleshy, puckered skin, in marked contrast to her sun and wind-beaten hands and face. Her knees are visibly inflamed. Gyatso directs the woman inside. She sits on the bench. Contrary to what one might assume, this medical encounter does not begin with initial questions. Gyatso knows this woman and has treated her for years. Instead, much of the therapeutic encounter flows forth from touch. Gyatso places his fingers along the woman's radial arteries, the gold and turquoise ring he inherited from his father glinting in the light. Pulse reading completed, he looks in her eyes and examines her tongue. Gyatso says the woman has a blood-wind disorder along with some infection. From here, stories of suffering spill out. These keep me awake, she says, pointing at her knees with a look of accusation and annoyance, as if they were a barking dog. The woman asks if the disease is Nyingba, literally old, or if it is Drakbo, a word that approximates hard or recalcitrant. Gyatso reassures her that these pains can be addressed. He gives her 2 weeks' worth of medications, wrapped in pages torn from an old student notebook. Avoid eating too much salt, but poultice your knees with bultog, he says, referencing sodium bicarbonate harvested locally. This harsh, demanding place provides at once the grounds for so much suffering and also, bountifully, the possibility of antidote. Of Sky and Soil, 4 p.m. Our visit to the Thinker Clinic complete, Gyatso makes a few house calls before we head back to Lo Tenzin's horseflies. I balance in the thick steel stirrups, perched above the wooden frame of a saddle, cushioned by carpets. I am bathed in sand, wind, and dust. We slow to a walk and dismount on the far side of the river that separates the walled city of Lo Munthong from territory beyond. Gyatso leads our sweat-soaked horses across a tawny stretch of land, down the well-worn switchback to the river's edge, where Poplars Chapter 3, Fieldboro Work and Ethnography. The experimental cultivation of high-altitude medicinal plants is a relatively new phenomena in Nepal and has been brought forth by push-pull factors. Some species are being over-harvested, in part driven by increasing demand for raw materials to service commercial production of both Ayurvedic and Tibetan formulas. This trend has also been linked to increasing market prices for certain ingredients. Yet many such plants require specific soil conditions in which to grow. Some fail to germinate. Sometimes it becomes difficult to reconcile use values and exchange values when considering the life cycle of a plant. Interestingly, much of the cultivation of Tibetan medicines at times combined with species distribution mapping and in situ conservation is being carried out by AMCI on the fringes of the booming Asian medicine industries in China and India, rather than as part of a strategy for growth within these industries themselves. A lot of this work has been funded by conservation NGOs and bilateral research or development organizations. This cultivation project in Mustang is being funded by a grant from the United Nations Global Environmental Facility Small Grants Program, for which I helped write the proposal. As Gyatso and I head toward the cultivation plots, I consider a refrain I have heard from AMCI in Nepal: without plants, we are nothing. Without plants, we have no medicine. And in AMCI, with no medicine is like a bird without wings. This metaphor shifts at times: a car without gas, a teacher without students, a meal without salt, a trader without goods, yet the meaning remains constant. Without these medicinal plants, the future of Soa Rigpa is jeopardized. Gyatso and I hitch our horses beside the cultivation fields. I follow my friend along the raised perimeters of barley, sweet pea, and buckwheat fields toward a large plot of land rimmed by a wall of adobe brick and stone. We have 3,000 square meters of farmland and have not used all of it. In the future we could cultivate more, my friend explains. Water can be a problem, though. And we need to have a path to market. This will get easier when the road really comes to Upper Mustang. At present it is difficult to make a profit when the price of transportation to Jomsom remains so high. But in the future, I think there will be opportunities for common people to make money by growing medicinal plants instead of only peas and barley. Gyatso's economics are lucid. As he fiddles with the lock on the gate, he calculates the cost of water rights and labor per square meter of land, the current market price for a kilo 91 prayers of aspiration, 8 p.m. We leave the cultivation grounds. Horsetail clouds streak the sky, foretelling a day of rain. Gyatso and I walk slowly, clockwise as is expected, around the perimeter of the wall and back toward Lo Kunfin, horses in tow. We listen to the sounds of early evening in Mustang. Pressure cookers release steam. Donkeys bray. Children play hide-and-seek around rows of choten. Tired-looking men and women return from harvest. Static-filled murmurs from satellite televisions diffuse into the cool air from the dark interiors of Munthang's few taverns. Horses unsaddled and fed, we collapse on the same divans where we began this day. The room is bustling again. Gyatso's sister is cooking dinner. Tenzin arrives after his day of ritual attendance. Their mother orders her grandniece to give us tea and popcorn. There is not much left to do except to eat and rest, and we dive into both. I reach for more popcorn. Gyatso lets his chin droop to his chest. His eyes close. I watch him sink into sleep, letting the exhaustion of this man's life give way to a certain childlike surrender. Then Tenzin sits down beside me with his laptop, fully charged. This is the problem of working with brothers. When one is resting, the other is ready to work. We have been discussing plans for Tenzin to visit the United States to fundraise for Lo Kunfin and see relatives in New York. I arranged a similar tour for Gyatso in 2003. The brothers alternate when it comes to foreign excursions. Now it is Tenzin's turn. Tenzin's computer boots up. He loads a PowerPoint presentation, a process he has mastered even though he speaks and reads virtually no English. As I wait for images to appear, I think of all the places these brothers have been: India, China, Bhutan, the United States, Britain, Germany, Japan, France, and Russia, including a stint as the resident doctors at a clinic in Tatarstan. This is difficult to square against the fact that about half of my own fellow US citizens do not own a passport. In this sense, modernity becomes a way of being in the world that lives within people who, according to stereotype, might seem the epitome of traditional, a middle-aged monk with dirty robes and dirty hands, here on the edge of the world. In this sense, Gyatso and Tenzin's life and life work illustrate Bruce Knopf's point that there are many ways of being modern in the world today. To deny the complex local global realities of people like these Amchi is to silence key ways that ideologies and socioeconomic influences circulate and shape contemporary life, from the power to buy things to the power to represent oneself on a national or global stage. Sienna Law, Tenzin says, with excitement, let me show you pictures from England. Tenzin spent some time in the United Kingdom earlier this year and had occasion to lecture on the history of Mustang and the future of Amchi practice at Oxford's Oriental Institute and the Wellcome Trust for the History of Medicine in London. He had also been blessed by an audience with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He describes his visit aided by the digital images he took along the way. He advances through a series of images with His Holiness, resting on one of him bowed before the man Tibetans can refer to, profoundly, simply, as presence. I ask him about this gift of time with the Dalai Lama. I requested his advice about our school. How to move forward, what to do about the problems we face, how to keep working toward our goals, he answers. What did His Holiness say? Tenzin's reply turns toward prayer. He chants a long, low supplication. Is this Tenzin's answer to my question or His Holiness's answer to Tenzin? Really, both are true. After the prayer, Tenzin tells me the advice the Dalai Lama bestowed on him: keep working with a pure heart. Keep making connections around the world. Keep finding points of shared interest and collaboration with other Amchi. The path forward will reveal itself through this process. The Dalai Lama then handed Tenzin several packets of Jinden, ritually consecrated pills made each year in Dharamsala. Medicine from blessing born. This too is efficacious practice.